In the vast, frozen forests and endless steppes of the East, a power was forged that would bridge the gap between Europe and Asia. Tsars and Vikings, icons and iron, revolution and resilience. These elements built the largest nation on Earth, a land of deep spirituality and brutal strength. This is the story of how a small group of river-dwelling traders grew into a global superpower that challenged the world, only to reinvent itself through blood and fire. Here are 1,000 years of Russian glory, conquest, and change in 20 minutes. The Kievan Rus and the birth of a people. Before the massive borders of modern Russia existed, there was the Kievan Rus. In the 9th century, the region was home to various Slavic tribes who were often at war with one another. According to legend, they grew so tired of the constant fighting that they invited a Viking prince named Rurik to come and rule over them to bring order. This Varangian, or Viking influence, mixed with local Slavic culture to create a powerful network of city-states. While Rurik started in the north, the heart of this new civilization eventually moved south to Kiev, which became a wealthy hub for trade between the Baltic and Black Seas. The most important turning point in this early history came in 988 CE with Prince Vladimir the Great. Vladimir realized that to truly unite his people and be taken seriously by other great powers, he needed a single religion. He famously sent envoys to study the world's major faiths. Legend has it, he rejected Islam because of its ban on alcohol, supposedly remarking, "Drinking is the joy of the Rus." Instead, he chose Eastern Orthodox Christianity after his messengers returned from Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. They described the services in the Hagia Sophia Cathedral as being so beautiful that they knew not whether they were in heaven or on earth. This choice changed the course of history. It didn't just bring a new way to worship, it brought the Cyrillic alphabet, allowing the Slavs to write down their own laws and literature. It also introduced grand Byzantine architecture, like the famous onion-shaped domes, and a deep spiritual connection to the Second Rome. This religious and cultural foundation would define Russian identity for the next 1,000 years, linking the freezing forests of the north to the ancient traditions of the Mediterranean. The Mongol yoke and the rise of Moscow. In the 13th century, the world shifted beneath the feet of the Russian people. The Mongol Empire, led by the fierce descendants of Genghis Khan, swept across the Russian plains like a tidal wave. This unstoppable force, known as the Golden Horde, burned ancient cities like Kiev to the ground and brought the various Russian princedoms to their knees. For over 200 years, Russia lived under what historians call the Mongol yoke. During this time, the Rus were not directly occupied, but they were forced to live as vassals. This meant that every Russian prince had to travel to the Mongol capital to beg for a charter to rule. And, most importantly, they had to pay massive amounts of tribute and taxes to the Great Khan. It was a period of isolation, where Russia was cut off from the developments happening in Western Europe, forced instead to look toward the East. However, this long period of suffering actually led to the rise of a new center of power, Moscow. Originally a small, unimportant timber fort, Moscow's location made it a perfect hub for trade. The princes of Moscow were clever. They won the favor of the Mongols by acting as their primary tax collectors for all the other Russian lands. While they were collecting gold for the Khan, they were also skimming off the top, using that wealth to buy up land and build a formidable army. Slowly but surely, Moscow began to gather the Russian lands. The city became the spiritual heart of the people when the head of the Russian church moved there, making it the new center of the Orthodox faith. The tension between the rising city and the fading Mongol power finally reached a breaking point in 1480. Ivan III, famously known as Ivan the Great, did the unthinkable. He openly refused to pay the annual tribute. He met the Mongol army at the Ugra River. After a long standoff where neither side dared to cross, the Mongols eventually turned and retreated. Without a massive, bloody battle, the Mongol yoke was finally broken. With the Mongols gone, Moscow emerged as the undisputed leader of the Russian world. Ivan the Great married the niece of the last Byzantine emperor, further strengthening the idea that, since Rome and Constantinople had fallen, Moscow was now the third Rome. This wasn't just a title, it was a mission. Moscow saw itself as the final protector of the true Christian faith and the center of a new, holy empire. This sense of destiny would drive Russian expansion for centuries to come, turning a small riverside town into the capital of a massive world power. Ivan the Terrible and the first Tsars. As Moscow grew, so did the ambition of its rulers. This era was defined by Ivan IV, famously known as Ivan the Terrible. He was a man of intense extremes, at once brilliant and deeply religious, yet prone to terrifying fits of violent rage. In 1547, he made a move that changed the nation's identity forever. He officially crowned himself Tsar, a title derived from the Roman Caesar, signaling that Russia was the true heir to the Roman Empire. Ivan was determined to make the Tsar the absolute master of the land. To do this, he had to crush the power of the boyars, the old nobility who had traditionally shared power with the princes. Through a period of state-sponsored terror and the creation of a centralized government, he stripped the nobles of their influence and made them servants of the state. Beyond politics, Ivan began Russia's dramatic march eastward. By conquering the regions of Kazan and Astrakhan, he effectively broke the last remnants of Mongol power and opened the doorway to Siberia. This was a turning point in world geography. It transformed Russia from a small European kingdom into a multi-ethnic, transcontinental empire that stretched across 2 continents. However, Ivan's heavy-handed rule and the mysterious death of his heirs left the country on shaky ground. His reign ended in a dark period known as the Time of Troubles. This was a catastrophic era, marked by a total collapse of authority, failed harvests that led to massive famine, and foreign invasions from Poland and Sweden. Russia was torn apart by civil war and almost wiped off the map entirely. It took a massive national uprising and the election of a new dynasty to pull the country back from the edge of the abyss, setting the stage for the rise of the Romanovs. The Romanovs and the window to the west. Stability returned in 1613 when the young Michael Romanov was elected Tsar, starting a dynasty that would rule for over 300 years. But the man who truly dragged Russia into the modern age was Peter the Great. Peter was a giant of a man, nearly 7 feet tall, with a restless energy. He realized that if Russia wanted to compete with Europe, it had to look like Europe. He traveled the West in disguise, learning how to build ships and organize armies. He forced his nobles to shave their traditional beards and adopt Western clothes. Most importantly, he fought a long war with Sweden to gain a coastline on the Baltic Sea, where he built a new European-style capital from nothing, St. Petersburg, his window to the west. Catherine the Great and the Golden Age. If Peter the Great gave Russia a physical body by building its navy and cities, Catherine the Great gave it a mind and a soul. Her story is one of the most incredible in history. A minor German princess who married into the Romanov family, learned the language, and eventually seized the throne in a daring coup against her own husband. Catherine was a woman of the Enlightenment. She was a brilliant intellectual who spent her nights writing letters to famous philosophers like Voltaire, discussing law, education, and human rights. Under her leadership, the Russian court in St. Petersburg became one of the most cultured, wealthy, and sophisticated in the world. She founded schools, supported the arts, and turned Russia into a true, great power that Western Europe could no longer ignore. But Catherine wasn't just a scholar. She was a fierce conqueror. She pushed Russia's borders further than ever before, successfully seizing the Crimean Peninsula and the northern coast of the Black Sea. This gave Russia warm water ports and solidified its control over the South. By the time her reign ended, Russia was a massive, confident empire that spanned 2 continents and dominated European diplomacy. This era set the stage for Russia's golden age of culture. In the decades following her rule, the seeds she planted grew into a world-class artistic explosion. This was the century that gave us the deep, psychological novels of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and the sweeping, emotional music of Tchaikovsky. However, this spectacular brilliance had a dark and heavy cost. While the elite were speaking French and discussing philosophy in marble palaces, the vast majority of the population, millions of serfs, lived in conditions close to slavery. These peasants were legally tied to the land and owned by the nobility. Catherine, despite her Enlightenment ideals, actually strengthened the laws that kept serfs in bondage to keep the nobles on her side. This created a massive, invisible divide in Russian society. On the surface, Russia was a glittering European empire. Underneath, it was a country of desperate, overworked laborers. This deep inequality was a ticking time bomb, creating a tension that would eventually lead to the violent revolutions of the future. Catherine left Russia larger and smarter than she found it, but she also left it divided against itself. The Napoleon invasion and the 19th century. In 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte led the largest army Europe had ever seen into the heart of Russia. Like many before and after him, he underestimated the Russian winter and the scorched earth tactics of the Russian defenders. The retreat from Moscow was a death march for the French, and the Russian victory made Tsar Alexander I the savior of Europe. The rest of the 19th century was a struggle between tradition and reform. While the Tsar finally abolished serfdom in 1861, the reforms were too slow for many. Revolutionary ideas, including a new philosophy called Marxism, began to spread among the workers and students. Revolution and the birth of the Soviet Union. The collapse came during World War I. Russia was losing millions of men, the economy was failing, and the Tsar, Nicholas II, seemed out of touch. In 1917, the country exploded. 2 revolutions in 1 year brought down the Romanov dynasty and saw the rise of the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin. Russia became the world's first communist state. The Soviet Union. This was a total social experiment. Private property was abolished, religion was suppressed, and the state took control of everything. After Lenin's death, Joseph Stalin took power, turning the country into a totalitarian machine. He industrialized Russia at a terrifying speed and at a massive human cost, with millions dying in purges and forced labor camps, the gulags. The Great Patriotic War and the Cold War. In 1941, Nazi Germany launched a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. This was the Great Patriotic War, a struggle for survival. The Soviet people showed incredible resilience, particularly during the Siege of Leningrad and the Battle of Stalingrad, the bloodiest battle in human history. The Red Army eventually pushed the Nazis all the way back to Berlin, emerging from the war as one of the world's 2 superpowers. For the next 4 decades, the world was locked in the Cold War. This was a global competition between the Soviet Union, East, and the United States, West, era of nuclear tension. The space race, with the Soviets launching the first satellite, Sputnik, and the first human into space, Yuri Gagarin, and proxy wars around the globe. Collapse and rebirth. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was a giant that had stopped moving. The economy was stuck, and the government was buried in red tape. To fix this, a new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, introduced 2 bold plans: glasnost, meaning openness, and perestroika, meaning restructuring. He wanted to give people more freedom to speak and modernize the way the country ran. However, instead of fixing the system, these reforms accidentally broke it apart. Once people were allowed to speak freely, they began to demand independence. The central government lost its grip, and in 1991, the Soviet Union officially dissolved. Almost overnight, It split into 15 separate, independent countries. The largest and most powerful of these was the new Russian Federation. The 1990s were a time of extreme shock therapy for Russia. The country tried to switch from a state-controlled economy to a free market almost instantly. The result was pure chaos. Prices soared, people lost their life savings, and the value of the currency crashed. During this time, a small group of well-connected businessmen, known as the oligarchs, used their influence to grab control of Russia's vast natural resources, like oil and gas, making themselves incredibly rich, while the average citizen struggled to survive. By the end of the decade, Russia was seen as a failing state. In 2000, a former intelligence officer named Vladimir Putin rose to power. He promised to restore the vertical of power and bring back stability. He moved quickly to rein in the oligarchs and put the country's wealth back under the control of the state. Under Putin's leadership, the Russian economy grew significantly, largely fueled by high oil prices. This new wealth allowed Russia to rebuild its military and take a much more aggressive role in international politics. Today, Russia has moved away from the democratic hopes of the 1990s, returning to a more centralized style of rule that echoes its past under the Tsars. The nation continues to balance its identity as a bridge between the East and the West, constantly asserting its place as a major power on the world stage. Though the Soviet flag is gone, the ambition to be a global leader remains as strong as ever. The pillars of Russia. Why the East still matters. Russia did not just disappear into the modern world. It remains a unique civilization that challenges Western assumptions. To understand Russia, one must look at the pillars that have survived every Tsar and general. 1. The geography of the soul. The sheer scale of Russia, covering 11 time zones, shapes the Russian mind. It is a land of extremes, from the Arctic tundra to the vast steppes. This geography has protected Russia from invaders, but also made it difficult to govern, leading to a historical preference for strong, centralized leaders. 2. The Orthodox spirit. Even after decades of state-sponsored atheism under communism, the Eastern Orthodox Church remains a core part of Russian identity. It provides a sense of sobernost, spiritual unity, and a feeling that Russia has a special, separate destiny from the West. 3. Resilience and sacrifice. Russian history is a story of surviving the impossible. From the Mongols to the Nazis, the Russian people have repeatedly endured suffering that would have broken other nations. This has created a culture that values collective survival and national pride above individual comfort. 4. A bridge between worlds. Russia is neither fully European nor fully Asian. It is Eurasian. It has the technology and literature of the West, but often shares the political styles of the East. This dual identity makes Russia a critical player on the global stage, a bridge that can either connect worlds or spark conflict. The story of Russia is a reminder that history is not a straight line. It is a cycle of collapse and rebirth, driven by a people who refuse to be forgotten. As we look at the colorful domes of St. Basil's Cathedral and the cold concrete of the Kremlin, we see a nation that has survived 1,000 years of fire and ice, still searching for its place in the sun.